You have other parameters, so you have to, all of you should know about that Wagon-Williams classification for pulmonary arterial hypertension, histopathology. Stage 1 is only intimal hyperplasia. Stage 2, little medial hypertrophy, then like that. Stage 5 and 6 is, 4 is plexiform. 5 and 6 means atherosclerosis, all those things. Okay.
Okay. So the main features of CTEPH is macrovascular obstruction and vasoconstriction. So other factors, neurohemorrhage factors like endothelin 1, which is a vasoconstrictor, it plays a major role in the pathophysiology of CTEPH and as a trigger factor for microvascular changes. So reduction in cross-sectional area of pulmonary arteries due to thrombosis and vasoconstriction, it causes further abnormal vascular remodeling. In thrombosis, it leads to small vessel arteriopathy. Of all these factors, that is persistent macrovascular obstruction, small vessel arteriopathy, vasoconstriction, it results in development of pulmonary hypertension and correspondingly right ventricular pressure overload. So this is the pictorial diagram showing the pathophysiological features of CTEPH. So here pulmonary embolism showing a wedge-shaped opacities in the peripheries of the lung, showing thrombus in the lumen of the vessel. There is macrovascular obstruction leading to increase in the pulmonary arterial pressure. Otherwise, the presence of persistent vasoconstrictor response leading to compromisation of the lumen, causing the pulmonary arterial pressure. So it leads to development of pulmonary hypertension. So indirectly it causes the stress over the pulmonary arterial walls. So the leading to certain changes, that is vascular arteriopathy.
Enlarge it, I think the words are not seen at all. Okay.
So initially the
no, that is okay. Over.
So the development of pulmonary hypertension causes increase in the shear stress over the pulmonary artery, leading to development of vascular arteriopathy. That is a medial hypertrophy and intimal proliferation leading to thickening of the vessel wall or microthrombus formation or plexiform lesions. So these three constitutes to small vessel arteriopathy.
Okay.
Coming to risk factors in the development of
plexiform lesions are these arterioles and venules. They form the capillary parts. They become zigzag and anastomose like that. So it becomes like a AV fistula, like tongue stent, like that. There's a both arterial side and venular side capillary connections which form multiple this one.
Coming to risk factors in development of CTEPH, so divided into various factors. Initially, factors relating to pulmonary embolism, development of recurrent pulmonary embolism, inadequate anticoagulation, or presence of large thrombus mass, residual thrombus, and when the initial pulmonary embolism event, the presence of large perfusion defects or age factor, that is or old age, when the first pulmonary embolism event is detected, and the pulmonary arterial pressures more than 50 mm of Hg at the initial presentation of pulmonary embolism, or presence of persistent pulmonary hypertension even after 6 months of acute pulmonary embolism event. So other risk factors: infected surgical cardiac shunts or pacemaker or defibrillator leads, post-splenectomy status, chronic inflammatory disorders like inflammatory bowel disease, thyroid replacement therapy, malignancy. All these can lead to thrombus formation leading to CTEPH.
Why post-splenectomy?
Post-splenectomy, the coagulation factors may be.
No, platelets will increase, na?
Okay.
So not thrombocytosis. So, and also they're more prone for infections, splenectomy
Yes, sir.
patients.
Infection.
New capsulated organisms like pneumococci, meningococci, all those things. That infection also may trigger a thrombus formation.
Formation. And presence of lupus anticoagulant or antiphospholipid antibodies and increased levels of factor 8, dysfibrinogenemia. These are the thrombotic factors leading to the development of CTEPH. And presence of cell polymorphisms and abnormal endogenous fibrinolysis leads to development of CTEPH. So, associated with major pulmonary vascular obstruction, CTPH, it consists of small pulmonary vessel disease, that is pulmonary arteriopathy, which originate from a high flow or high pressure state in previously unaffected vessels, which is driven by hypoxia, infection, inflammation from associated conditions. Clinical presentation, it is the presentation is equal in both sexes, and mainly
Not equal, I think more common in females.
females. Sorry, in ERS it gave it as females, but
Huh?
NJM, European Respiratory Journal, they gave it in more female preponderance, sir. But in
Ah.
NJM they quoted as
No, okay, probably usually female, but probably males means other factors also will be there, smoking, all those things.
sir.
Okay.
Symptomatology is routine pulmonary symptoms of pulmonary hypertension, exercise intolerance, fatigue, dyspnea, chest discomfort, syncope, lightheadedness, and peripheral edema. In here we have to we have to take history regarding the previous pulmonary embolism event or any other risk factor that may lead to development of pulmonary embolism. We have to take thorough history of this. Uh, in patients without history of the pulmonary embolism, the thorough history to identify any clinical events that is consistent with the venous thromboembolism, it should be taken. On physical examination, we can elicit reduction in the splitting of S2, accentuation of the P2,
That's
loud
what we
P2,
call it as closed split S2.
close.
The normal split duration is decreasing. That's what we call it as in a pulmonary hypertension. We have a closed split S2. So that's same. They have put it as reduction in splitting of S2. Okay.
Close split S2, accentuation of that is loud P2, and palpable right ventricular heave.
Okay.
Coming to diagnosis, mainly imaging modalities or hemodynamic evaluation. These are the major modalities in the diagnosis of CTEPH. Routine echocardiographic evaluation should be done to detect presence of persistent pulmonary hypertension in patients with previous history of pulmonary embolism. If it is present or persistent even after 6 months after acute pulmonary embolism event, we have to consider those patients as high risk development of CTEPH. So, routine echo evaluation in those patients may lead to early diagnosis and improve in the management and outcome of the disease. So, echocardiography provides the first clue to the diagnosis by detecting the presence of pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary hypertension with or without right ventricular dysfunction, it should raise concern about CTEPH in a patient with previous history of pulmonary embolism. Echo findings in this is where is right ventricular dilatation, hypertrophy or hypokinesis, right atrial enlargement, right ventricular pressure over that is suggested by shifting of the intraventricular septum towards the left ventricle during systole or presence of tricuspid
Some
regurgitation.
disturbance is there. Huh? Okay.
I will mute it.
Mike. Okay.
So these are the common echo findings seen in pulmonary hypertension. So the TR jet velocity, based on that we can calculate pulmonary artery systolic pressure. We can grade the pulmonary hypertension. The other imaging modality is ventilation perfusion scan. It is it has a higher diagnostic efficiency towards the CTE-PH, but the personnel who able to read this scan, they are very limited. So most of the centers, they are not using this VQ scan. VQ scan, it differentiates CTE-PH from other causes of pulmonary hypertension. So based on the VQ scan, the diagnosis of
So
CTE-PH,
what do you do for a ventilation scan? Which isotope use, Mastan?
radioisotopes are iodine.
Yeah. Ventilation. See, VQ means ventilation is
Ventilation.
different, perfusion. Q is flow.
Flow,
So
yes, sir.
ventilation, you use one isotope. Perfusion, use another isotope.
Nitric oxide we will use, sir.
Nitric oxide, no, nitric oxide is a vasodilator. Normally, xenon 133 is used common. I don't know recent. Still, I think ventilation mainly xenon, and perfusion you can use anything like technetium or other thing. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So if you find that ventilation scan is normal and perfusion defect is there, the diagnostic of pulmonary embolism. So if you have ventilation defect and pulmonary defect means there's more of a some other pathology like bronchitis or pneumonia,
COPD,
all those things like that. So that was the 2 scans was to be done. So that was the standard for diagnosis for pulmonary embolism before in the 30, 40 years back. Now after advent of the CT pulmonary angiogram, all these things have become little redundant. So normally they do just a perfusion scan and you can correlate with a chest x-ray. If chest x-ray is normal and perfusion defect is there means definitely it's an embolic episode because if there's a parenchymal lesion like that, ventilation scan will abnormal. So there's no obvious parenchymal lesion like pneumonia, consolidation, fibrosis, or all those things. So we feel that it's only a perfusion. So that's why at that time we used to do advise only a chest X-ray. CT was also not there. Now you can take CT, and CT will give us the lung problem, and perfusion scan will show about the vascular problem.
Vascular.
But not commonly done unless you are doing some research or study. We don't do it routinely.
So the criteria for diagnosing CTE-PH is presence of at least one
I
mismatch.
think as a pulmonologist, I thought you will be knowing. Huh?
Sir, I remember it as nitric oxide, sir. That's why.
Nitric oxide, no, I don't think nitric oxide is having a xenon. I think radioactive isotope. Nitric oxide is a very labile, very fast degenerate. So you can't tag with a radioactive label and do it. Understand?
Yes, sir.
Nitric oxide is used as a vasodilator in primary PH children, all those things like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, sir. So, if there is any one, at least one defect, encompassing to half of the segment, then we have to we can diagnose it as a CTE-PH. Whereas in patients with a large thrombus and pulmonary arterial hypertension associated congenital heart diseases, or in those with pulmonary arterial aneurysms, the perfusion defects, they may be non-segmental defects. So this
What does it mean?
They may not confine to particular segment. It seems that they
No,
are
it is diffuse one.
pulmonary segments.
Non-segment means not one segment. So it will be all segments.
Whole lobe will be involved.
So that is a congenital heart disease, all those things like that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And VQ scan, it does not anatomically localize the extent of disease, and for that, so that this scan, based on this scan, we should not go for surgery. I mean, we should not assess the surgical operability in particular patients. Sensitivity is 100% in diagnosing CTPH. It is 93% specific and 96% accurate in diagnosing CTPH. CT angiography, it provides the data regarding anatomical localization and surgical accessibility, which cannot be done with the VQ scan. So CT angiography, it shows eccentric thromboembolic material, subpleural densities, right ventricular enlargement, and mosaic parenchymal pattern. These are the various features that can be seen with CT angiography. So if the thrombus is present in the main and lobar pulmonary arteries, the accuracy for detecting these abnormalities is very much higher when compared to those thrombus present in segmental or subsegmental level. So if either CT angiography or VQ scan is inconclusive, or if surgery is being considered, so I mean, if surgery is to be done, if CT angiography or VQ scan is inconclusive, then the other options are right heart catheterization and pulmonary invasive pulmonary angiography that can be performed to confirm the diagnosis and for defining the physiological and anatomical characteristics. So the right heart catheterization along with the invasive pulmonary angiography is a gold standard for establishing the diagnosis and assessing the operability. So
Wordings of say establishing means it is confirming.
yes, sir, confirm.
For diagnose, you may not require. So establishing and assessing operability, whether it is suitable for operation or not. So this review article, those things, every word will give a lot of meaning. So you have to be very specific, and this one. If you don't just like that means we'll forget. Okay.
Sensitivity of CT angiogram is 96.1% and specificity is 95.2, and it is 95% accurate in diagnosing CTPH. The various angiographic patterns that correlate with operating findings are presence of pulmonary artery webs or bands, intimal irregularities, abrupt stenosis of major pulmonary artery, obstruction of lobar or segmental arteries at their origins. These are the surgical findings seen after in patients with CTPH. Hemodynamic evaluation is done by right heart catheterization with invasive pulmonary angiography. This investigation quantifies the degree of pulmonary hypertension and can be used to assess the responsiveness to vasodilator therapy. So, by administering vasodilator, if the reduction in pulmonary artery pressure is very much higher, if it is more than 50%, then it is the long-term survival is good among those patients who undergo the pulmonary thromboendarterectomy procedure. So differentiating CTPH from recurrent pulmonary embolism, it is challenging because in both these conditions there is a overlap of risk factors. So there is a CTPH, chronic thromboembolic pulmonary arterial hypertension, or recurrent pulmonary embolism, that is chronic thromboembolic disease. So both these conditions we have to differentiate between these two. So the clues that suggestive of CTPH is the symptoms and signs of pulmonary hypertension will be gradually progressive, and there will be right ventricular failure, which is a gradually progressive right ventricular failure, and there will be no response to fibrinolytic therapy or anticoagulation therapy or antithrombotic therapy for 6 months duration. Whereas in case of chronic thromboembolic disease or recurrent pulmonary embolism, the symptoms and signs they will occur in episodic pattern. So in prognostication of CTPH, 6-minute walk distance is used, and in order to prognosticate and in order to gauge the patient's response to therapy. So this is the diagnostic algorithm of CTPH. Initially, based on history and history of pulmonary embolism and detection of pulmonary hypertension, we have on echocardiography, we have to go for CT angiography, pulmonary angiography, or PQ scanning. In this scan, if the findings were normal, so we have to rule out CTEPH. If the findings suggestive of CTEPH, if the findings are inconclusive, then we have to refer for specialized center where right heart catheterization and pulmonary angiography can be done. So then we have to do this investigation to confirm the diagnosis and to determine whether disease is amenable to surgical treatment or not. Accordingly, we have to treat CTEPH based, by surgical methods. Coming to treatment modality, surgical and medical therapy, most effective therapy is the surgical, that is pulmonary thromboendarterectomy. Uh, it removes the obstructive whitish hardened thromboembolic material, and it improves the hemodynamic measures of mean pulmonary artery pressure, pulmonary vascular resistance, and cardiac output. So it is performed with the use of cardiopulmonary bypass with intermittent circulatory arrest to permit the dissection from main pulmonary arteries to the subsegmental branches. So the operability criteria of CTPH is patients with NIHA functional class 2 to 4, surgical accessibility of thrombi. If the thrombus is present in the main lobar or segmental pulmonary arteries, they are easily accessible, and absence of severe comorbid disease and patient concern. According to the surgical specimen, 4 anatomical types of CTEPH are distinguished. Among them, type 1 disease, thrombus involving main and lobar pulmonary arteries. It accounts for 25% of all cases. And type 2 disease, which accounts for 40% of the cases. Here, there will be intimal thickening and fibrosis that is proximal to the segmental arteries. The thrombus that is involving the segmental artery level. Whereas type 3 disease, which accounts for 30% of the cases, here the features will be fibrosis, intimal webbing, and thickening, which is confined to the distal segmental and subsegmental arterial level. Whereas type 4 disease accounts for less than 5% of cases. It is defined by microscopic distal arteriolar vasculopathy without a visible thrombus. That is a present.
This is all mostly anatomical. Like first one is I think main pulmonary, right and left pulmonary. Next is lobar branches, proximal segmental artery. Then next one is
subsegmental level.
Subsegmental branches. The fourth one is at the level of the arteriolar level.
Pulmonary hypertension with without any visible thrombus. So here this type 4 disease, it is generally non-operable disease.
Even type 3 is difficult. Only up to type 1, type 2 only you can operate, because even at the level of segmental vessels, the endarterectomy, everything is very tough. I see they're all deep inside the parenchyma. So approach, all those things is very tough. Only number 1 and 2 categories you can do something. 3 and 4 is tough. 4 is definitely gone. Third also, unless you are an expert dealing with only these things like that. Okay.
So the preoperative predictors of favorable outcomes is the presence of pulmonary vascular resistance of less than 1200 dynes, absence of major coexisting conditions. These two are the favorable pre-operative predictors. Contraindications to pulmonary thromboendarterectomy is small vessel disease, that is type 4 disease, and expected post-operative reduction in pulmonary vascular resistance. If it is less than 50%, then it is also a contraindication to surgery. And if there is a increased perioperative risk, surgery is contraindicated. Patients in whom the post-operative pulmonary vascular resistance, if it is decreases by at least 50%, that is to a value of less than 500 dynes, they will have more favorable prognosis after surgery. And with pulmonary thromboendarterectomy, 30-day mortality rate, it ranges less than 5% in most experienced centers to 10% elsewhere. Based on the expertise also, the mortality rate changes. So the two most common post-operative sequelae are pulmonary artery steal syndrome that occurs when blood flow is redistributed from previously well-perfused segment to newly opened ones, and reperfusion pulmonary edema. These are the most common post-operative sequelae of surgery. So the late adverse events are residual elevation in the pulmonary arterial pressures and recurrent pulmonary hypertension in patients who initially had hemodynamic improvement after surgery.
So, Raju, why you will have reperfusion pulmonary edema?
Maybe because of sudden recruitment of new vessels.
Sir, initially the segment will be thrombosed, sir. Perfusion will be less. Sudden opening of the vessel, it will lead to imbibition of the fluid in third compartment, interstitial compartment.
Not that. This is
In
an
the
afterload
vasculature.
mismatch. So, and also more important is that, see, the pulmonary edema which you get in an increased flow is called active pulmonary edema. See, our left heart disorders is a passive. See, negative pressure goes up, so fluid seeks. Whereas here, because of the increased flow, the fluid comes out. So that's why it was, no, initially, even in congenital heart disease, they used to call that patients with increased pulmonary blood flow is more of acute active, proactive, that was a passive like that. So one is reperfusion will increase the flow. So then the patient may go for pulmonary edema, active pulmonary edema, not the classical pulmonary edema of a rise of pulmonary capillary pressure. Okay.
Okay. So the other adverse events were residual increase in pulmonary arterial pressure and recurrence in the pulmonary hypertension in those patients who are hemodynamically normal after surgery. Pulmonary hypertension results from incomplete endarterectomy, inaccessible chronic thromboemboli, or small vessel arteriopathy. So, this residual pulmonary hypertension is an important predictor of late postoperative adverse events. The presence of postoperative NIHA class 3 or 4 symptoms, unsuccessful pulmonary thromboendarterectomy, high pulmonary vascular resistance, and persistent abnormalities of gas exchange, they are associated with increased risk of late adverse events. The other surgical procedure is balloon pulmonary artery angioplasty. It is an alternative therapy in patients who have inoperable disease due to inaccessible disease or persistent or recurrent pulmonary hypertension even after thromboendarterectomy. Then there will be improvement in the NIHA functional class and 6-minute walk distance is seen. So optimal medical therapy, it is chosen for patients who are inoperable. Medical treatment includes anticoagulation. So this persistent anticoagulation therapy, it lacks evidence in the randomized control trials to support this practice. Rationale in using anticoagulation is to prevent in situ pulmonary arterial thrombosis, development of recurrent venous thromboembolism. So, medical intervention in addition to anticoagulation, that is addition of pulmonary vasodilators, it is considered in patients with inoperable disease or those with persistent or recurrent pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary thromboendarterectomy. So the advanced,
what are the recent thing which is very much stressed where you have deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism, which group of patients? No, that all those things we know previously, like surgeries, all those things.
sir.
Recently now a lot of work and articles are coming on patients who are having more higher chance of deep vein thrombosis or thromboembolic phenomena, sometimes presenting as pulmonary embolism also. What is that?
Pregnancy.
Huh?
Pregnancy, sir.
No, pregnancy is routine. There's recent, I think,
COVID, sir.
not
COVID-19.
COVID.
It is also
Then mainly now they're stressing on malignancy. See, these malignant patients are having a higher chance of arterial or venous thrombosis, and they're having that. So that's why now many people advise anticoagulant routinely for patient with malignancy, because the malignancy, due to various factors, they have a hypercoagulable state and clot formation and embolization, or sometimes clot forming there only like that. So that lot of articles and concept has come that malignant patient, if somebody is deteriorated suddenly, means you suspect he has developed a thrombosis or pulmonary embolism. Now all our drug therapy, everything is directed to that, and whether to give them this our newer anticoagulant, all those things like that. Okay.
So apart from anticoagulation, usage of pulmonary vasodilators, it contributes to increased survival among patients with inoperable disease. Pulmonary vasodilators and endothelin receptor antagonists like bosentan, ambrisentan, and phosphodiesterase inhibitors like sildenafil, and prostacyclin analogs like epoprostenol, treprostinil. So the underlying principle for this practice is the morphological characteristics of vessels in CTPH, they closely resemble those in idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension. So these pulmonary vasodilators, they are mostly useful in idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension. They are useful, I mean, they showed reduction in the classification, WHO functional class, and improvement in the 6-minute walk distance. So various trials that are showing efficacy are bosentan effects in inoperable forms of CTPH. This is a trial in which 157 patients were randomly assigned with uh, uh, for presence of CTPH and persistent or recurrent pulmonary hypertension even after thromboendarterectomy. So in them, they have given bosentan treatment. It resulted in significant improvement in hemodynamic variables in terms of pulmonary vascular resistance, cardiac index, levels of proBNP, and dyspnea. In a open label trial, 104 patients with inoperable CTPH, they received treatment with 50 mg of sildenafil TID. So with this treatment, there is significant improvement in pulmonary vascular resistance, cardiac index, increase in 6-minute walk distance, and WHO functional class. And riociguat is a newer class of drug for pulmonary hypertension, the cyclic guanase inhibitor. So it is a currently approved medical therapy for inoperable CTPH based on the chest trials. So in this trial also they have done over 261 patients. They show improvement in 6-minute walk distance, NIHA functional class, and reduction in pulmonary vascular resistance with riociguat. And with prostacyclin analogs, that treprostinil and epoprostenol, which is available in sublingual inhalational forms or intravenous forms. So in a study involving 28 patients with severe inoperable CTPH, they subcutaneously administered treprostinil, which resulted in improvement in 6-minute walk distance, WHO functional class, proBNP levels, and cardiac output, and pulmonary vascular resistance. So this is the final treatment algorithm of CTPH. So after confirmation of CTPH, we have to prescribe for lifelong anticoagulation, and we also assess. We have to assess for operability by multidisciplinary team. If the patient is technically operable, and with the acceptable risk-benefit ratio, we have to perform pulmonary endarterectomy. Or if the patient is operable with a non-acceptable risk-benefit ratio, if the post-operative or perioperative risk is high, then we have to go for targeted medical therapy. If the patient develops persistent symptomatic pulmonary hypertension, even after pulmonary endarterectomy, we have to administer medical therapy. So medical therapy is indicated in those patients who are not inoperable, or even if they are operable, there is an increased perioperative risk, or chances of post-operative sequelae are high, or in those patients who developed persistent symptomatic pulmonary hypertension even after pulmonary endarterectomy, those are the candidates for medical therapy. So even after with medical therapy, patient is having persistent severe symptomatic hypertension, then we have to consider for heart lung transplantation.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I think we have discussed pulmonary hypertension types and treatment also 2-3 times. We have reviewed that, I think.
Yes, sir.
Same thing. There are mainly, I think, 3 groups of drug. One is vasodilators like nitric oxide or sildenafil. All the calcium blockers, all are mainly vasodilators, which act at the cyclic GMP level like that. The other is a endothelin antagonist, that is the busanton, all those things. And then the prostaglandin analogs, which will also cause vasodilatation, that is the epoprostenol and congeners. So this, you have to remember, I last time also said that diagram, if you remember, that's enough. Flow diagram is there, what is the pathophysiology and what drugs act at what level, what is the mechanism. So you have to remember easily that one is vasodilatation due to nitric oxide or nitric oxide stimulant, the sildenafil, all those things are same mechanism. And even calcium blockers act to the calcium influx. So then the prostaglandin analogs and endothelin antagonists. So these vasodilators act in different way. One way they cause direct nitric oxide, other is cyclic GMP, some people with phosphodiesterase inhibitors, all those things. Okay, good. I think it is a covered guy. No, this not only for thromboembolic, even if they ask about primary pulmonary hypertension, also the treatment, everything is same like that. So the pulmonary hypertension is even in clinics, it will be there, definitely primary PH patients. So that's why you have to be thorough with all the clinical diagnosis. Then treatment will be asked 1 or 2 things. So once you know that concept, we'll not go into the detail. Rarely, sometime we ask about what are the major side effects of these drugs like that. See, bosentan, I think, is mostly a gastrointestinal side effects, very common. Diarrhea, vomiting, all those things. Prostaglandin analogs, mainly hypotension, those low perfusion problems. Anyhow, sildenafil, we know, nothing much. Okay. Next Wednesday, what is that?
Sir, I will be speaking on cardiac transplantation, sir, the second part. Management of cardiac transplant